what that word means.
No, well, times are tough. What's up, everybody? College football, DFS live before lock from Awesemo.com. I am Ben Reza. That is Matt Kajeski. It's not Saturday, but it is Friday, 2-game slate. And Matt, normally with a 2-game slate, I wouldn't be too excited, but I'll be honest, these are fantastic games that we have to talk about tonight.
Yeah, man, you and I have been early Maryland backers. Never thought it was going to happen, but usually I just back the teams that I start winning bets on. And Maryland has been very good to us so far this year. I have them again tonight, so I'm hoping the Terrapins get it done for us.
We're going to talk about those spreads. We're going to talk about these players. And we also are going to talk about our friends at Prize Picks, who, as you guys know, and if you don't know, you should know, they've been offering up their daily prop-based contest. They want to help you get started. They're offering an amazing deposit bonus. If you haven't been over there, you're going to pick 2, 3, 4, or 5 players. Basically, you're just going to decide, did they go higher or lower? A lot of different options. If you get 5 out of 5, you can get up to 10x your entry. And it's not just college football. They've got the NFL. They've got basketball. They've got baseball, all the sports that you can take advantage of. Download the app in the App Store on Google Play. And when you make that first deposit, use the promo code Awesemo. You can get an instant first match deposit bonus of up to $100. Tonight, they've got all the regulars on there, Matt. I know you talked about this earlier, but is there anyone that stood out that you're kind of starting your Prize Picks, card, we'll say, with?
Yeah, I looked a lot at the Prize Picks for today. There's a couple of receiving ones I'm really interested in. Marshawn Ford for Louisville, the tight end. He's at 39.5 right now. If you hit this earlier, you could have got him around 34, 35. He's run more routes than any other receiver on the team. They kind of have this nasty 6-man rotation, but Marshawn Ford is the clear number 1 tight end, so he just ends up being out there more. I like the over on his. And in the same vein, like Josh Johnson, you could go under on 42.5. He's only running a route on about 30% of the dropbacks, there. I think those are 2 pretty sharp ones just in the receiving room. Is there anything you liked?
I was looking more at the quarterbacks tonight, particularly, and I wanted to ask you about this with Illinois. Peters is ready to go. Do you think he's on a somewhat short leash? Because honestly, the guy from Rutgers was better than I thought he would be in relief.
He was. He actually managed the offense somewhat capably. And I said mean things about him when he got put into that game. I think Peters, they did a great job pricing the quarterbacks, in my opinion. I have Peters projected for 184 yards. And that's with Sitkowski playing 10% of the snaps. So trying to account for some of that uncertainty at the quarterback position. I don't think Peters has a long leash. If I was going to bet this, it would be towards the under, assuming he gets benched, because I think it's pretty efficiently priced.
Fair enough. The only other one that really caught my eye with the quarterbacks, I'm going to the rushing yards. Malik Cunningham, I think, will get his on the ground today. You got 57.5 there. In the second game, he didn't really need to carry the ball because they played Eastern Kentucky. But against Ole Miss, he had 18 carries for 79 yards. If he takes that kind of volume, I think he's going to eclipse that 57.5 tonight.
Yeah, I got him at 63. I like that one too.
So we'll obviously be talking about that throughout the show. Really good stuff there. But let's dive into it. We've got 2 games. First up, we've got UCF. They are a road favorite against Louisville. They've been in the bounce house. They've got it done. They made an epic comeback against Boise State. Then they played a made-up school. But they're a prolific offense. You've got Dylan Gabriel. You've got a lot of receivers. Talk to me about this Knights attack.
Got no respect for Bethune-Cookman, I guess. But
go ahead.
Dylan Gabriel's awesome, man. And he hasn't taken a step back under the new coaching staff. I thought that was a risk heading into the year, but they've been just as fast and they've been fairly balanced as far as pass to run ratio. Getting down in that Boise game early certainly helps that. So I just wonder, in a competitive game where UCF is projected to win, how do they use their offense? Gabriel is still a fantastic play on both slates. He gives you a little bit of rushing, and he's really rushing more than he ever has in his career. 107 rushing yards so far this year. And his Prize Picks prop, or at least earlier, was around 30. I didn't catch it when we were just in the stream. Now I bet under, because prior to this year, he'd only had 2 30-yard rushing games or more in his career. And he had 2 in his first 2 games this season. So just expecting some negative regression on the ground. But with that said, he is mobile for DFS, and he's live to get the 300-yard bonus any single game. So I think he's the top quarterback play pretty clearly, and he's really easy to stack.
His rushing yards up to 38.5 over on Prize Picks. So that's pretty lofty.
It might have been higher earlier. I honestly can't remember. I closed Prize Picks just now, but this is when I took the under on.
On the ground, I do want to ask you because, as we talked about, they fell behind by 3 touchdowns to Boise State. So normally you say, okay, man, Dylan Gabriel is going to lead them back. It's going to be an aerial attack. Bowser had a massive workload on the ground there. He had 33 carries in that game for $172. He also can catch the ball a little bit. So is he just a focal point of this offense, regardless of game script? He's got an appealing 5,900 price tag. What do you see from him tonight?
I think he's the best play on both slates at running back, but he's a significantly better play on DraftKings where he's just priced pretty egregiously at 5,900. The only concern I see with Bowser, you have Trillian Coles playing now. So Trillian Coles missed that first game because of a suspension. He's a former walk-on, but apparently they really like him. And he had 11 carries, 78 yards. He's been getting talked up by the coaching staff quite a bit. I don't know how much he plays, but he just adds a little bit of uncertainty to the picture. With that said, I still think Bowser is very clearly the top running back play on the day. You just don't get guys with 30 carries in 4 target upside on usually main slates, let alone a 2-game slate. I think he's a lock button play.
Yeah, I mean, just the discrepancy you see it immediately. You got 10K and 5,900. Something doesn't make sense there with the pricing. You've mentioned the receivers, so let's talk a little lineup construction before we move to Louisville. How many is too many? Can you go like a super stack with Gabriel and like 3 receivers? What are you looking at tonight?
In big tournaments, you certainly can. I like to bring this up. I saw a main slate 2 years ago with USC. This is a main slate we're talking about too, where a player stacked Keaton Slovis and then he stacked 3 receivers. It was like Amon-Ra, Drake London, and Michael Pittman. Because of price, they cannibalize each other usually, so none of them were really expensive. But then USC just had like a bananas outcome, and all 3 of them were in the optimum lineup on a main slate. We only have 2 games here, so it's even more likely that something like this were to occur. It's not the most likely situation, but it's something that could certainly happen. And in high-risk contests, some of the bigger contests we have tonight, I think you can do that. The issue with UCF is these 3 receivers are a little more expensive than some other places. But with that said, even a player like Brandon Johnson at 5K on DraftKings is still really affordable. He's been playing just as much as the other receivers, Jalen Robinson and Ryan O'Keefe. And in fact, if you look at Johnson, he's somebody that already has 128 yards receiving, which is more than some of the other receivers in this backfield or this receiving core, namely Jalen Robinson. And then conversely, on FanDuel, you have Ryan O'Keefe as your extreme value play. I think Jalen Robinson does come in slightly under-owned here because you have cheaper options in O'Keefe and Brandon Johnson, and people are going to want to play the Maryland receivers, so potential spot to target for leverage. But you can stack any of these 3 any which way and really any way you want. I'm going to try to get 2 of them in a lot of lineups, at the very least 1.
There's no doubt, again, 2-game slate. It's just a different building mentality. So totally get that. It's just, again, it's almost like a showdown mentality. I know we talked Thursday Night Football yesterday with the NFL. You kind of have to plan for that script. So you have that. Talk to me about Louisville, though. Where does Malik Cunningham come in when you're ranking these 4 quarterbacks?
Malik Cunningham projects really well. It's coming mainly on the ground because he has such good rushing upside, as you mentioned at the beginning of the show. For me, he projects for 63 yards, which is phenomenal. He's a high chance of the score, too, because Louisville has a high team total. They're only slight underdogs here, so they're going to have to score in some way. This game has a phenomenal total overall. So if Louisville puts up 31 points like they're projected for, Cunningham's going to have a lot to do with it. As a passer, he's taken a little bit of a step back. I think to be expected. They lost their top 3 skill position players in Javian Hawkins, Tutu Atwell, and Des Fitzpatrick. Playing Cunningham, I think, is a little more challenging than playing Gabriel and even playing Tagovailoa in the second game because stacking him is a little bit difficult. We talked about this with the prize pick situation too. Marshawn Ford is running the most routes, and he's their tight end. On DraftKings at 3,500, I think he's a really easy play because what does Marshawn Ford have to do to pay off 3,500? I would argue not very much. But if you're looking at some contrarian options, which I think is good for tournaments, these players have a chance to go under-owned and maybe have a big game. But like Tyler Harrell, he's running the second most routes, at least in week 2, only 8 targets, 20 receiving yards in the year, which is pretty inefficient. Jordan Watkins has run the most routes in week 1. And then his route rate dropped to 44% in week 2, which is interesting to look at here. The player that might see more time is Amari Huggins-Bruce, who's been easily the most efficient player on the field for the receivers, but he still hasn't even eclipsed 44% of the routes. What I'm trying to say is all the receivers are extremely volatile, and we don't really have a clear path to playing time for any of them. It's possible one of them emerges as like the alpha receiver here, but it definitely hasn't panned out yet.
Where does that leave the backfield then? Because obviously Cunningham can move. He's mobile. Does that hurt Jalen Mitchell, or is he also in play, kind of like Bowser versus Gabriel?
In the backfield, Jalen Mitchell has emerged as the lead rusher. He's 30 carries through 2 games, which is pretty good. Also 3 targets. I think with more efficiency, we could see more out of Jalen Mitchell. Again, they got beat up pretty bad by Ole Miss in week 1, and then they demolished Eastern Kentucky in week 2. So we haven't really gotten a great look at what Louisville is going to do in competitive game scripts yet. I think seeing Mitchell's carries jump from 8 to 18 is positive. In game scripts that are similar to what we saw last week and even more competitive ones, Mitchell should probably crest 20 carries. Even as a 7.5 point underdog, I think he's probably the second best running back on the slate behind Bowser. Hassan Hall, who I thought might play more of a change of pace role, has only carried 5 times in each of the first 2 games. Jalen Mitchell below 5K, I think he's a pretty good option.
Chat just talking about this too. I think he can get involved in the passing game. There's no doubt about it. But I wanted to ask you, because again, we're trying to find leverage on a 2-game slate. Are you going to roll the dice at all with Cunningham by himself?
I'll run a lot of Cunningham solo.
Okay.
It's because of opportunity cost. And the UCF receivers not being that expensive like O'Keefe and Johnson are affordable. And you can jam them with Jarrett, who we'll get to Rakeem Jarrett in a little bit, extremely underpriced. And then you can pretty easily play one of either Dante Demas or Jalen Robinson, one of the expensive receivers. There's just options in the cheap range where I'm not sure you need to get to the uncertainty, particularly in cash builds, but it's a possibility.
It's just tricky. Again, we're only in week 3. Both of these schools, they have one real game and then a game against inferior opponents. I don't know what we see, but I think the one thing to really look at is Cunningham's rushing attempts in the 2 games. When he's pushed in a game like this, I think he's going to be extremely active, or at least forced to use his legs. Whereas last week they geared down. He's not going to need to do that. So let's keep in mind 6-7.5 point total, definitely the healthier of the 2, but let's move to the other game. Then we can circle back if we need to. We've got your Terps, 7.5 point favorite going to Illinois. I don't know, man. We'll talk with Maryland first, because I do like this team. They've got baby Tua. They've got serious dudes on the outside. I don't know exactly how good they are. Again, one real game, one fake game, but you got to like the passing attack. Where does Tua rank, Tua's brother, when you look at these 4 quarterbacks tonight?
Yeah, Tagovailoa, I think he's a good play. I like him more in tournaments. I think he's easier to stack. So if you're reaching for like ceiling performances, Tagovailoa with those receivers makes some sense, whereas it's a little harder to stack Cunningham. I think Cunningham just has more paths to failure. With that said, I think they're both really good plays. I think in cash, I'll end up with Cunningham, and then I'll probably have more Tagovailoa in GPPs. And it's kind of flipped. I think on FanDuel, Tagovailoa is the better play just because he's a little bit cheaper. And FanDuel really efficiently priced, unlike DraftKings, which is still pretty soft tonight. So FanDuel, I think you probably need to go to Tagovailoa. DraftKings, I think you can play either depending on your preferences. But he's averaged over 300 yards passing through 2 weeks. You mentioned some of the schools. I mean, we bet Maryland against West Virginia, and West Virginia has a propensity for shootouts. And then in week 2, they played Howard. So, I mean, pretty easy for him to get there. But Tagovailoa has been really good passing outside of the Northwestern game to open his career. He's actually been fantastic in every game except that. He is somewhat mobile. He's going to finish with positive rushing yards, but he usually doesn't have any sort of upside unless he hits a long run, which happens few and far between. I think as the second highest implied team total on the slate, you should certainly be considering Tagovailoa stacks.
On the outside, you've got Demas, you've got Jarrett. $1,700 difference on DraftKings. That was the first thing I noticed. Do you think that's too big a gap
between Jarrett and
Demas?
Yes, it's too big of a gap. So between the two, it basically just comes down to box score production because they've been targeted at essentially the same rate. Demas has 261 yards on 16 targets. Jarrett has 188 on 15 targets. So there's a 1 target difference, but there's nearly an 80-yard difference, a 70-yard difference in receiving yardage. And it just comes down to big plays. And they both have hit them. So I think this will normalize throughout the year, and you have them essentially both playing the same role. It's going to be an extremely narrow target distribution between these two players. I have a lot of lineups where I'm just hitting both of them because Jarrett's so underpriced.
Question from chat. Wicked Roller, Demas or O'Keefe?
Demas.
I would agree.
Demas is the number one projected receiver on the slate.
Can you dig deeper than the big two on the outside for Maryland? Like if you're going to Tagovailoa stacks, is there anyone besides Demas and Jarrett that you want in there?
Not really. I'll bring up Darryl Jones, who's been running as the wide receiver 3 most of the time, but he's splitting time directly with Jayshon Jones and Brian Cobbs. All three of these guys are multi-year veterans with the program, but Darryl Jones has 4 targets. Jayshon Jones has 6, but the routes have favored Darryl pretty heavily. The last player I'll mention is Chego Okonkwo. He's been operating as the tight end. He didn't play last year. He had to opt out because of a heart condition, but he's a major red zone weapon. And I was really encouraged by the 90% route rate in week 1. Week 2, he didn't play a lot, but again, they played Howard. So I think Chig could be somebody that we look to in GPPs because he's cheap. He's going to give you direct leverage off Demas and Jarrett. And he has 2 touchdowns on 4 targets. He's an option in the red zone.
In the backfield, Tayon Fleet Davis doing some serious work. Penny Boone returned, though. They were given, I mean, again, we keep saying this, they were giving all sorts of people carries last week. But in week 1, Jacobs got some run as well. Where does the order go for these carries tonight?
It's a little bit unsettled because we've had injuries in both games. Tayon Fleet Davis has been active for both, and he's 18 rushes, 123 yards, and that was against West Virginia in week 1. And then again, they kind of took their foot off the gas in week 2. But in week 1, we didn't have Penny Boone. He was out with a concussion, and then he returns for week 2. But at the same time, Jacobs plays in week 1, and then he's out for week 2 with turf toe. So now all 3 backs are healthy, and we just don't know how this is going to shake out. The depth chart listed Tayon Fleet Davis as the starter with Jacobs and Penny Boone as co-backups. Penny Boone is like a big back, like a bruiser, a guy you use in the goal line. Jacobs is somebody that was pretty efficient in their first game, and he actually carried 14 times for 50 yards. That wasn't too far behind Tayon Fleet Davis. This might be more of a committee than we think. I don't know, which is why I think Tayon Fleet Davis is probably the 3rd best runner to target on the slate. And you can definitely play like Isaiah Jacobs and Penny Boone in tournaments based on the fact that this backfield is just uncertain. What if it's more of a 50-50 timeshare than like a 70-30 split? Then I think you definitely want to get Jacobs in there and Penny Boone.
That's one of the questions I think could define a slate, again, with only 4 teams on it. Let's talk about the last team, and then we'll circle back. Peters returns from Illinois. They had a good win to start the season against Nebraska. Then just 2 absolute, they weren't atrocious losses. The teams are fine, but you got to win these games if you're trying to take the next step. 1 and 2 now really need a win. I mean, I assume clearly, well, let me ask it this way. Is there any merit to going to Peters? Because clearly he's the 4th option at quarterback.
Yeah, if you're looking for leverage, he's going to be a huge leverage point tonight. All of the ownership is going to concentrate on the 3 players we already mentioned. I would guess they go on DraftKings specifically. It's Dylan Gabriel 1, Malik Cunningham 2, and then Talia Tagovailoa 3rd, and then a huge gap. And then like Brandon Peters maybe at 15-20%.
Yeah. Where does he even go? Isaiah Williams has been getting the looks. They could be trailing again tonight. They are a home underdog. Do you look to them? The backfield, what's the status of Chase Brown and Epstein, and where does this fall? Just talk about this whole team.
So Epstein's hurt. He's going to miss his 2nd straight game, but they still have been using 4 runners. Really tough for this Illinois team, especially if you're trying to predict for DFS. Chase Brown finally made an impact after he led the team in rushing last year. A lot of people played him in week 1, but he led the group with 37 snaps. That's really good, and he pretty much paced everybody else. Reggie Love had 19 snaps. Josh McCray had 12 snaps. So I think in tournaments, Chase Brown is going to need a lot to go his way. He needs the work again, and then you need a little bit more favorable game script than Vegas is projecting. But it's possible, and people aren't going to own him. So I would look to Chase Brown maybe on FanDuel where it's tighter. I think he's a better play. On DraftKings, I don't know if you need it, but he's going to be there for leverage. The receivers, you have everything flowing through Isaiah Williams. He's a former quarterback. He runs a lot in the slot. They'll give him carries sometimes. His 31 targets are a 31% target share, which is far and away the lead for the team. Behind him, you have Casey Washington and Donnie Navarro as the next most active receivers, neither of whom has been very productive. They're at 45 and 51 receiving yards, respectively. There's a chance Brian Hightower returns tonight. If he does, I think Donnie Navarro comes off the field and you see these three receivers split time anyway. I will say Casey Washington, I think, is the best price-adjusted play if you're not playing Williams because he's the stone min, but I don't think you need it. And then tight end, Daniel Barker, he's pretty active as a receiver. He didn't appear really in week 0, but he has a 75% route rate through Illinois' last 2 games. He's going to be a low ADOT kind of player, but he's 3,800. You could maybe look to him too. But at the same time, I'm just trying to find the 900 to get up to Williams.
All right. So we've talked about the 4 teams. Let's quickly get you bet Maryland.
I bet Maryland, yeah.
Okay. I didn't bet the first game. I think I'm going to end up betting Maryland. I think I might bet the over in that game because I think Illinois will be able to move the ball a little bit against Maryland. West Virginia was able to, so I wouldn't be stunned to see it go over 61. But last question, and then we'll take them from chat. Even on a 2-game slate, are all your lineups going to have 2 quarterbacks?
100%.
Okay.
Especially this slate. Like we have, I think we've had slates in the past where there isn't a single signal caller that's even on Peter's level. This one, I think you can play any of the 4.
All right, let's do it. Let's do some questions, chat. If you got them, put them in there. If also you can hit the like button, let's get these likes up. We got a lot of good people in here. Not everybody's mad at me tonight. I think some of you still like me. So let's see if we could push this up, get close to 100. And again, I want to give a shout out to Prize Picks. Doing great work. You see it on the screen. They will match that deposit bonus. Who is your favorite RB2?
Behind Bowser, I'm guessing you're saying.
Yeah, I'm assuming that we're going to put him in because he is the RB1.
Jalen Mitchell.
Okay. We got, do you have a lean here? It's going to be a 2v2. O'Keefe and Demas versus Robinson and Johnson.
O'Keefe and Demas.
I would agree. This is good because I actually would agree there. Fleet Davis or Isaiah Williams?
Fleet Davis.
Let's see. Oh my God. I turned to monster chat. You guys are out of control. Gabriel and Cunningham combo probably going to be super owned. Any upside in fading one of them? I mean, I think that's the optimal move, but you can always roll the dice. Would you agree? Are you trying to get them both in?
Yeah, you can fade them. It highly depends on what tournament you're playing. There's going to be, tournaments today, some of the bigger ones aren't even that big. I don't know how much leverage you're going to need. I think if you're playing both of those quarterbacks, just think about taking on, like some sort of other leverage points. And again, there's 3 of them that are going to be splitting a lot of ownership. So I don't think you necessarily need to go down to Peters unless you really are playing one of those big ones. Just think about how you're building your rosters with like correlation. Maybe do something with the running backs where there's a little more uncertainty there.
Good question from Corey here. Do you have any problem linking up Bowser and Coles together?
No, I have some lineups like that.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, throwing Gabriel in there, I still think you can do it, honestly.
So what, like the popular construction today is going to be Jarrett, at least one of the expensive receivers. So either Robinson or Demas, and then some of the other mid-price guys like Johnson, O'Keefe, Isaiah Williams. Those guys are going to be popular. So if you kind of change your build a little bit and you run maybe a Bowser, Trillion, Cole stack, something you could do is just load up on all of the expensive receivers in stacks. And then you're basically just betting on the run games for like Louisville and Maryland to fail. Maybe you would do this like a full stack with the first game. You have the running backs and you have Malik Cunningham getting all the rushing production. So Jalen Mitchell fails. And then whatever is left, you just fill with the the Maryland receivers.
I wish Rutgers was here.
I always get those 2 teams. Like I have this mental like block where I accidentally replace them with each other.
You got Sikowski on the mind. It happens. Isaiah Williams or Jalen Mitchell?
Mitchell.
His prop is sitting at 63.5 rushing yards. Do you have a lean there?
He is projected for, that's not what I've bet to answer your question. What is it? What is his prop?
It says 63.5, but that's from chat.
I bet it's 64.5.
Well, look at that. Spot on. Not a question, but an awesome comment. Almost got a takedown off your content last week. That is what we like to hear, chat. Really, really good stuff. Is Marshawn Ford worth a play if you're using Cunningham?
Yeah, for sure. Look at the rest of your roster and the tournament you're playing. If it's cash games or something small, you probably don't need to. But yeah, for sure. I think he's the best receiver play on Louis. At least, maybe not the best, but the most secure play on Louisville among receivers.
Would you run 100% Gabriel and GPP? That's depending on how many lineups you're playing.
I would not run 100%. I would run some lineups with Tagovailoa and Cunningham.
Cunningham.
I'm playing tournaments tonight. I don't have 100% Gabriel. He's my most owned quarterback, but I do have some Cunningham and some Tagovailoa combined.
Yeah, for a 2-game slate, 3 really good quarterbacks, which is exciting.
Yeah, what a delight.
What?
What a delight for us tonight.
A delight.
Normally we're watching like Rice and UTSA and other teams on Friday nights. We got some good games tonight.
We're lucky. We're normally watching what was the team that just invented a new quarterback a couple weeks ago?
Wait, excuse me?
We were talking about this guy who was mobile, and then they just played a different quarterback. They played Utah State. Who played Utah State the other day?
No, I don't know what you're talking about. The dude was hurt. We just didn't hear about it because it's an FCS school, so nobody reports on FCS schools. I thought you were talking about Virginia for a second because they invented a position.
Well, good for them.
Little tease to you. We have Virginia on the slate tomorrow, so Ben and I will talk about that.
Okay, nonsense. A little Armstrong season. Slim Brody, good guy. Hope he's ready for the Sooners tomorrow. Favorite props? We talked about that at the beginning. I like Malik Cunningham a lot. You mentioned a couple of the receivers for Prize Picks, did you not?
Yeah, I like the under on Josh Johnson for Louisville.
Braden Smith or Isaiah Williams, DK GP pay?
Williams. All things considered, if it's a huge tournament and it's correlated, maybe Smith.
All right, we're doing good here. Any content for Saturday college football, my man, E-Mac, you know it. Tomorrow, live before lock, me and Matt breaking it all down. We've got a lot of bets to get to. I know your article, it is free today, right?
Yeah.
Your super article. So if you want a sneak peek behind some of the great tools we have, now is the time to go read that thing.
I'll throw it in the chat before we get out of here.
Yeah, look at that. Tyreek, I think you've got it covered there. Those are some good low-owned leverage guys. I think you want to sprinkle with those type of players and just hope to hit one.
I played a lot of like Louisville receivers in tournaments today.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're one of the unknown teams that you're going to kind of have to decipher what's going to happen. But
I feel terrible about it. But
North Dakota, I had to Google it. Utah State played North Dakota.
We bet Utah State. It was a profitable game.
Yeah, it was 21-0 the other way, and then they woke up. All right, we've done it. Look at this. 7 seconds to lock. We did it, my friends. 2 games up, 2 games down, just like that. Good luck tonight. We want to see you back tomorrow again, 11 a.m. Eastern. Me and Matt breaking it all down. Saturday slate, answering your questions. Good luck tonight. Win some money, and we'll see you guys in the morning.